You would think the best thing a franchise player can be is a great player at both ends of the floor, but based on recent history, that might not be entirely true. When you look deeper into roster construction, elite two-way players are harder to build around than one might think. And it all boils down into one main reason: energy preservation. When a star is relied heavily on both ends, the role players around them need to compensate differently. The best supporting casts often consist of elite defenders who can guard multiple positions and space the floor. But when your stars themselves fit that archetype, they end up having to do dirty work that a role player typically does. That turns building a championship roster into a complicated puzzle to solve. Look no further than the Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum are as gifted and versatile as anyone in the league, and on paper they seem like the perfect foundation to build around. But that two-way ability is precisely what makes construction so tricky. When the Celtics won the 2024 championship, they solved this problem almost perfectly, surrounding the Jays with two-way guards and bigs and Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and Derek White. Those guys handled the primary defensive grunt work, letting Tatum and Brown conserve energy and focus more on the offensive end. It worked. They won a title. But that group is almost entirely gone now, and what's been exposed since tells you everything. The New York Knicks figured out a formula for the now parity-driven NBA. Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns serve as the two primary offensive hubs, but are the fourth and fifth best defenders in the starting lineup. Around them, the Knicks have stacked wing defenders, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Josh Hart, guys who guard multiple positions and don't need the ball to be effective. The stars stay fresh because the defensive burden is spread out, and that shows up most in the fourth quarter, allowing the Knicks to make huge comebacks in the playoffs. For Celtics fans, it was easy to point to three-point variance and injury luck as the reasons they lost to the Knicks, but the real reason was simpler. The Knicks were fresher late in games due to more reliable roster construction. The San Antonio Spurs learned the same lesson the hard way in this year's NBA Finals. Victor Wembanyama is arguably the most gifted defensive player the league has ever seen, and in the 2026 playoffs against those same Knicks, he was everywhere, protecting the rim, switching onto guards, covering for a small roster that had Julian Champagnie playing power forward. It gave the Spurs huge early leads. And then Wemby would fade, and the offense would dry up. Stephon Castle, tasked with guarding Brunson the whole series, wore down the same way. Less effective defensively as the games went on, and diminishing offensively as a result. Those factors allowed the Knicks to make huge comebacks and win the series in 5 games, despite the Spurs having the lead for a crazy 72% of the series. If you watched those Spurs games and felt deja vu to the Celtics a year earlier, you weren't imagining it. It's the same problem with a different face. So what does General Manager Brad Stevens do? The most straightforward answer is trading Jaylen Brown, and rumors suggest that's exactly what he's exploring. 1 max salary is simply easier to build around than 2, leaving more flexibility for championship caliber supporting pieces. A trade involving Trey Murphy and Herb Jones might fit what the Celtics should be looking for, but do the Pelicans, a rebuilding franchise, really want Jaylen Brown? Maybe the Hornets would bite to reunite Brown with former Celtics assistant coach Charles Lee. The Celtics could involve themselves with the unofficial LaMelo Ball trade and try to reroute Naz Reid as a nice big man addition. Turning Brown into Murphy, Jones, and Reid might be worthwhile. However, that would turn out to be a complicated trade, involving a whopping 6 teams. The Celtics getting the 3 aforementioned players, the Hornets getting Jaylen Brown, the Timberwolves getting LaMelo Ball, the Nets getting Julius Randle, the Bulls getting Nick Claxton, and the Pelicans getting a bunch of picks. There's a bit more to that trade than just that, but it's so complicated I didn't want to go further into it. If the relationship is truly broken between Brown and the organization, after just missing out on trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo, then that is an entirely different story. That becomes more of a decision for Brad Stevens of how important locker room chemistry is compared to prioritizing optimal roster construction. Finding a trade partner for Brown that makes sense is extremely difficult at this point, so it might make more sense to keep the star wing after Brad scopes out his trade market, whether the relationship between the two sides is broken or not. That leads into a more radical option. The Celtics wanted a way to have more two-way wings in their starting lineup. They could lean into positionless basketball entirely, play Tatum as a point forward, and surround him and Brown with bigger, longer wings, such as Hugo Gonzalez and Jordan Walsh. Two youngsters are already on the roster, who Brad Stevens wouldn't part with in Giannis trade talks. The team would be huge and have switchability at every position, but might struggle guarding small, quick guards such as Tyrese Maxey, who is absolutely cooking the Celtics throughout their 7-game series. There was a lot of talk after the Game 7 loss that the Celtics struggled to guard Joel Embiid, which is definitely true and is a big reason why they're looking to get new big men this offseason. But people seem to forget that Tyrese Maxey was actually the one that got the 76ers over the line at the end of the game, because the Celtics simply had no one quick enough to guard him. Derek White tried his best, but he's getting older and doesn't have the quickness anymore to keep up with a guy like Maxey, and also struggle with handling aggressive ball pressure on offense due to lack of guard play. It's a harder sell, but it addresses the same core problem. Anyone playing devil's advocate will point to the Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen pairing as blatant evidence that building a roster around two elite wings can work. However, those two are among the greatest players in NBA history, with Jordan being considered by many as the greatest of all time. Also, Tatum and Brown are more like if Pippen was the main guy, given their skill sets. Pippen was more of a primary ball handler and spent more time on the opponent's best player than Jordan, while Jordan could focus more on isolation scoring and off-ball movement. Tatum and Brown both take cracks at defending top players on opposing teams, while Tatum is more of a primary ball handler than Brown. That implies Jaylen Brown would have to play like the clear number one option and be one of the best players of all time. That Bulls duo was more of an anomaly than a blueprint for future teams to follow. Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter serve as a similar caliber duo, along with a more recent one of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. On paper, both duos were expected to work well, but never quite reached their lofty expectations. Each duo had overlapping skill sets and were difficult to put top role players around. Tatum and Brown had the perfect team around them in 2024, allowing them to win one championship. But with the new salary cap rules, it is hard to imagine them having a supporting cast like that ever again. Tatum and Brown's contracts are only getting more expensive, meaning it will be even harder in the coming seasons for Brad Stevens to put championship caliber role players around the two. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video and to subscribe for more Boston Celtics and NBA analysis. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Brad Stevens should trade Jaylen Brown or try to make it work? Me personally, I'm hoping Brown is back next season unless a great trade arises. I don't think Brad Stevens should trade Brown for pennies on the dollar, even if the fit has become awkward. I'd also appreciate any trade ideas, as I'm personally at a loss for what a fair deal looks like at this point. I'd love to hear what you all think. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to making more videos just like this, so hopefully I'll see you in the next one.